Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're the Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorder Society, which is an all India charitable trust working towards improving the lives of people with Parkinson's and their families in India. अभी ये लॉकडाउन में हमारे सब सर्विसेज जो है अभी ऑनलाइन है. हम वीकली ऑनलाइन थेरेपी सेशंस करते हैं, बोथ फिजिकल और कॉग्निटिव सेशंस. पार्किंसंस के बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन, एजुकेशन और उनके मैनेजमेंट भी जानकारी देते हैं. अभी हमारा एक हेल्पलाइन है, फ़ोन काउंसलिंग फॉर पीपल विद पार्किंसंस और उनके केयर गिवर्स. ऑनलाइन सेशंस भी है स्पेशली फॉर केयर गिवर्स और यंग ऑनसेट पार्किंसंस के लिए. तो अगर आप पार्किंसंस पेशेंट है या आपको किसी पार्किंसंस पेशेंट को पता है तो आप उनको हमारे संस्था के बारे में बता सकते हैं. ये हमारे कॉन्टैक्ट डिटेल है नीचे और ईमेल एड्रेस. जैसे मैंने बताया था कि अभी हमारा सब ऑनलाइन सेशंस चल रहा है अलग अलग स्टेट्स में. तो हमारे बहुत सारे ऑलमोस्ट 24 ऑनलाइन सेशंस चल रहा है अलग अलग लैंग्वेजेस में, हिंदी, इंग्लिश, कोंकणी, तमिल, तेलुगु, मलयालम, गुजराती, अलग अलग लैंग्वेजेस में है. ये हमारे कॉन्टैक्ट डिटेल्स है, आप नोट डाउन कर सकते हैं. ओके ये हमारा मोबाइल नंबर है, दोनों पे आप कॉल कर सकते हैं या मैसेज कर सकते हैं. ये हमारा ईमेल एड्रेस है. हमारे यूट्यूब चैनल पार्किंसंस एनजीओ पे बहुत सारे एजुकेशनल वीडियोस है, एक्सरसाइज वीडियोस है, बहुत सारे वेबिनार्स है. आज का वेबिनार भी यूट्यूब हम स्ट्रीम कर रहे हैं. ये हमारे वेबसाइट है www.parkinsonsocietyindia.com. यहाँ पे बहुत सारी इन्फॉर्मेशन है हमारे संस्था और हमारे एक्टिविटीज़ के बारे में, पार्किंसंस के बारे में भी. और अगर किसी को वॉलंटियर करना है या डोनेशन देना है तो आप ये सब इन्फॉर्मेशन हमारे नए वेबसाइट पे आप देख सकते हैं. ये हमारे फेसबुक पेज है जहाँ पे हम, और ये नीचे हमारे इंस्टाग्राम पेज है जहाँ पे हमारे एक्टिविटीज़ के बारे में हम इंफॉर्मेशन डालते हैं, नए इवेंट्स के बारे में हम डालते हैं और पार्किंसंस के ऊपर भी हम जानकारी देते हैं. तो प्लीज़ लाइक एंड सब्सक्राइब दीज पेजेस. दिस इज़ अ डिस्क्लेमर ऑफ लाइबिलिटी की जो द इंफॉर्मेशन दैट वी प्रोवाइड is to help you live your life with Parkinson's. Okay, it is not a substitute for a consultation. And please note that these sessions are being recorded and photographed. And if you do not wish to be seen, please keep your video off. However, we request everyone to please keep their video off and their mics on silent during the session. ये हिंदी में सेम लिखा गया है, प्लीज आप पढ़ सकते हैं. ओके, टू मार्क इंटरनेशनल डे ऑफ पर्सन्स विद डिसेबिलिटीज हमने डिसाइड किया कि हम 2 वेबिनार रखेंगे. एक जो है, जो आज का वेबिनार है, वो अंडरस्टैंडिंग द राइट्स ऑफ पर्सन्स विद डिसेबिलिटी एक्ट 2016. ये एक्ट में पार्किंसंस इंक्लूड किया गया है. सो इट इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट वी अंडरस्टैंड what are our rights under this act. Also, please note on the 10th of December, we will be having another webinar on decoding the disability certificate in particular. So please do register for this event if you'd like to get more information on this. We will be sending out the Google form soon. Okay, so now I would like to introduce our speaker for today, the very illustrious Ms. Rama Krishnamachari. She is the co-founder and director of Diversity and Equal Opportunity Center, DEOC, and has about 3 decades of work experience in the field of disability inclusion and equality. She specializes in the area of disability policy and accessibility. She headed the legislation, networking, and communication units at the National Center for Promotion of Employment for Disabled People, which is a leading national level advocacy organization. There, she played an important role in bringing about several policy changes related to disability in the country. She was a member of the Steering Committee on Labor and Employment of the Planning Commission and also served on the committees of the Confederation of Indian Industry and NASSCOM for developing their inclusion programs. She has a number of research studies and publications to her name on disability legislations, accessibility standards, data on disability, employment, etc. Ms. Rama has also won many awards, one of the prominent ones being the NCPEDP Shell Helen Keller Award for developing a holistic framework for inclusion of people with disabilities at the workplace in 2010. So we are very, very honored to have her with us here today to share her expertise on this subject. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I want to share the screen. How do I do it? Can you give me the permission to do that?
Yes, 1 second. I'll just make you the host. 1 second. Yes, now you're co-host, so you can.
Yes.
Sorry, I just want to make one announcement. अगर आपको कुछ प्रश्न पूछना है तो आप हमारे चैट बॉक्स जो नीचे है उस पे आप लिख सकते हैं. अगर आप YouTube पे देख रहे हैं तो आप YouTube के चैट बॉक्स में भी आप लिख सकते हैं और at the end of the session हम एक Q&A session रखेंगे and we will try to answer all the questions. Please note, as I mentioned, disability certificate के बारे में जो process है वो हम next webinar में बात करेंगे. Also, anything related to any medical symptoms or any difficulties, हम दूसरे webinar में we will answer those questions. आज के webinar सिर्फ Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act के बारे में है. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you and good afternoon everybody. मैं हिंदी और इंग्लिश दोनों में बात करने की कोशिश करूंगी. ये वाला जो एक्ट है 2016 में पास हुआ है. इससे पहले भी एक्ट था 1995 में. पहला वाला जो कानून था 1995 में आया है फॉर पर्सन्स विद डिसेबिलिटीज. इनफैक्ट आप देखेंगे कि अगर हम 1947 का वो लेते हैं फ्रॉम द डे ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस, इट टुक ऑलमोस्ट 50 years के बाद पहला कानून आया जो विकलांगता के लिए कानून आया है. उसमें भी कुछ ही विकलांगता 7 टाइप्स ऑफ डिसेबिलिटीज कैटेगरीज इन्वॉल्व थे. और उसके बाद तब से थोड़ा बहुत इफ यू सी सम एक्सेसिबिलिटी हियर एंड देयर, कुछ रैम्प्स दिखते हैं इधर उधर या कुछ चीजें हो रही हैं पर्सन्स विद डिसेबिलिटीज टू ग्रेट एक्सटेंट थैंक्स टू द 1995 एक्ट, बट दैट वाज वेरी लिमिटेड एक्ट. उसके बाद 2007 में इंडिया ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which actually recognized the rights. Even earlier 1995 Act had few rights, but it was largely a welfare-based legislation. 2007 brought in that thing about human rights of people with disabilities. And 2016, one of the obligations of the 2007 ratification was that every country that has ratified the UN Convention, उनके ऊपर जिम्मेदारी था कि एक अपना डोमेस्टिक लेजिस्लेशन लेके आए. इसीलिए The Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016 बना और उसके रूल्स बने हैं 2017. आज मैं इस 2016 के कानून के बारे में आपको आज बताऊंगी मैं, जो एक बहुत बड़ा बदलाव जो ये वाला कानून लेके आया है या UN कन्वेंशन लेके आया है. जो पहले का जो डिसेबिलिटी में का अप्रोच जो था, हमारा ज्यादातर का अप्रोच था कि व्यक्ति में प्रॉब्लम है. हम कहेंगे कि पर्सन कैन नॉट रीड बिकॉज ही और शी इज ब्लाइंड. हम कहेंगे व्यक्ति ट्रैवल नहीं कर सकता क्योंकि वो चल नहीं सकता. सारा प्रॉब्लम हम एक व्यक्ति के ऊपर डाल रहे हैं और ये समझते हैं कि सोसाइटी जो है बिल्कुल सो कॉल्ड नॉर्मल का शब्द इस्तेमाल होता है कि जो सोसाइटी है अनचेंजिंग है, और सारा जो फोकस है कि हम इस तरह का जो सोच है कि प्रॉब्लम व्यक्ति में है, तो गवर्नमेंट का जो इंटरवेंशंस जो थे, पेंशन देना था या होम्स बना देने थे फॉर पीपल विद डिसेबिलिटीज, इवन कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर में ग्रांट दे दिया या वॉलंटियरिंग कर दिया कोई सोसाइटी में जाके, यही अप्रोच था। डिसेबिलिटी में काम करने का मतलब था चैरिटी अप्रोच। आप डिसेबिलिटी में क्या काम कर रहे हैं, हम ये ग्रांट दे रहे हैं, कंसेशन दे रहे हैं, वगैरह वगैरह। लेकिन around, I would say, in the 50s and the 60s, many of the organizations started coming up. Very important, they were providing services. Spastic societies, Association for the Blinds, Association for the Deafs. And the way they approached disability was again to provide the much needed service ki therapy de diya, education de diya, speech therapy, vagara vagara. And effort was still to fit in the person. Again, जो फिट हो सकते हैं वो फिट हो सकते हैं। पूरा जो हमारा काम था डिसेबिलिटी सेक्टर में कि व्यक्ति को इस सोसाइटी में फिट इन करना है, जो फिट इन हो गया वो हो गया। अगेन सोसाइटी वाज रिमेन अनचेंज्ड। एंड मुझे याद है उन जमाने में, मैं स्पेशल एजुकेटर हूँ और हम लोग जाते थे स्कूल्स में और कहते थे कि बच्चे को एडमिशन दे दीजिए प्लीज, हम सारा जिम्मेदारी हम उठा लेंगे। स्कूल बिल्कुल कुछ भी चेंजेस नहीं करेगा, मैक्सिमम क्लासरूम को नीचे लेके आ जाएंगे, लेकिन उसके अलावा टीचिंग मेथोडोलॉजीज या असेसमेंट मेथोडोलॉजीज कोई चेंजेस नहीं। अगेन इट रिमेन्स, दैट्स अ वेरी मेडिकल काइंड ऑफ एन अप्रोच टू करेक्ट द डिसेबिलिटी एंड मेक देम फिट इनटू द सोसाइटी। ये जो एक्ट, जो पैराडाइम शिफ्ट की बात करते हैं, देखिए प्रॉब्लम वाला शब्द लेफ्ट साइड से निकल के वो राइट साइड में आ गया। अभी जो सोच है ये है, पर्सन विद डिसेबिलिटी इज अ पर्सन विद इक्वल राइट्स। सारे राइट्स हैं जो एक ह्यूमन बीइंग को है, एक सिटीजन को है, वो सारे राइट्स पर्सन विद डिसेबिलिटी को है। राइट टू education, right to get married, right to have children, right to property, right to vote. Every right that is available to persons with disability. अभी हम कैसे define करते हैं कि the problem lies with the society. Now we say a person cannot read, not because he is blind. We do not have information in accessible format. Today we say a person cannot travel, not because he's a wheelchair user, we do not have accessible transport. अब जब हम ये वाला सोच लेके चलते हैं कि problem lies in the society, then the interventions are to change the society, to correct the barriers that exist in the society. हम फिर कानून बनाएंगे persons with disabilities के लिए, ramps और other facilities, toilets and other facilities to make the buildings accessible for people with disabilities. Sign language interpreters लेके आएंगे, even employers will create awareness amongst employers. So that is the change that we need to bring in. So abhi jo hai, this is called the social model approach, where the problem lies in the society and the society needs to change and provide those. Yes, people would say right to vote तो पहले भी था, अभी भी है, क्या नया चीज है इस कानून में? The point is that right to vote पहले भी था, अभी भी है, कोई नया चीज नहीं है। लेकिन if the means and mechanisms to exercise the vote, if that is not available, then actually the right is not available. ये जो कानून है वो means and mechanisms की बात कर रहा है, accessibility की बात कर रहा है। अगर वो नहीं है तो actually आप कोई right उनको नहीं दे रहे हैं। तो यहाँ पे एक और एक्ट में terminologies is very crucial to understand, because persons with disability, many people ask, is that the right terminology? You know, Disabled, because the word is, there is a DIS to disability, so people think it's a negative word. But let me tell you that this has been debated and discussed for many years by people with disabilities. They have felt that this word comes closer to what they experience. Disability is not an opposite of ability. Opposite of ability is inability. Disability word comes from the fact that people are disabled by the barriers that exist in society. Therefore, the word disabled means that there is a problem, but that problem lies outside the person. We are disabled by the environment, attitude, barriers that exist in the society. Therefore, disability or disabled person is a social model terminology which shows that disability is a social construct. Yes, everyone has an impairment. That medical condition is called the impairment. But that impairment becomes a disability when there are barriers that you face. So, and again, many people forget the fact that, they are persons first. Either only the disability is, like we say, autistic, epileptic, and stuff like that, or patient, for example. People forget the person behind this thing. So therefore, person first language is very crucial. And we tend to use the term normal for a non-disabled person. So there is nothing like a normal. Therefore, persons with disability is the right terminology. Coming to the general principles. So Act का जो पहला portion है वो कहता है that these are general principles हैं. We look at policies. हम लोग देखते हैं कि specific section जाने से पहले these general principles actually form the foundation of the act. ये general principle इसलिए बहुत जरूरी है ये समझना, so that जो भी हम disability के लिए काम कर रहे हैं, हमें constantly general principle को याद रखना पड़ेगा. I will not go into the detail, but just tell you a few things. Respect for inherent dignity, freedom to make one's own choices. ये सब बहुत ही शब्द जो है समझने वाली बातें हैं ये. Dignity. As simple as there was a time when you have to go for a disability certificate, the government would ask, आप अपना full photograph दीजिए जहाँ पे disability दिखाई दे. और camps में जब disability के लिए assessment कर रहे हैं तो there will be no privacy for a person. और 4 लोग उनको उठा के ले जा रहे हैं, there is no dignity. So dignity is very crucial for persons with disability. Freedom to make one's own choices. A lot of times people with disabilities are not given the freedom to make one's own choices. अपना choice खुद नहीं. Even कपड़े क्या पहनने हैं, तुम खाना क्या खाना है, या medical treatment लेना है, नहीं लेना है. Sometimes people with disabilities से नहीं, guardian से पूछा जाता है, लेकिन persons with disabilities have full right to make their own decision whatsoever. Then one other thing is non-discrimination. So person with disability should not be discriminated on the grounds of disability. If a person has been asked to not given admission in school just because the person has disability, that is violation of the law. If somebody has been removed from a job, that's a violation of the job. Abhi, recently, I will talk more about the non-discrimination. It was not allowed to use certain zipper in the jail is also a discrimination. And also, the third thing, I'll talk more about discrimination because it's important to understand. Discrimination is basically anything which is a direct discrimination. Direct discrimination is, when you're told that, sorry, you have a disability, we will not employ you. That's a direct discrimination, even though you're qualified. Indirect discrimination could be that, say, for example, you're having an interview which is on the 3rd floor, or, a certain employment condition stops you from, say there is a medical test and the doctor kind of decides that you're unfit for a job. These are also discrimination. And third important thing is denial of reasonable accommodation. Because what is reasonable accommodation? Many people don't understand. कई लोगों को ये word समझ नहीं आता. People think accommodation का मतलब, you know, रहने की जगह. लेकिन reasonable accommodation जो कानून में दिया है, ये होता है adjustment. अगर कोई adjust नहीं कर रहा है या कोई आपको change नहीं कर रहा है, मैं उसका example आपको देती हूँ. ये वाला पिक्चर आप देखें. जो पहला वाला पिक्चर है, हर डिफरेंट हाइट के लोग हैं लेकिन सेम स्टूल दिया है. ये ट्रीटिंग एवरीवन द सेम. हर एक को एक ही जैसा स्टूल मिलेगा, आप जितने भी हाइट के हों. इसमें मजा तो टॉल पर्सन को आ रहा है. छोटा जो व्यक्ति है, जो छोटे हाइट का व्यक्ति है, वो तो दिखाई नहीं दे रहा उसको कि मैच में क्या हो रहा है. ट्रीटिंग एवरीवन द सेम, ये इक्वल अपॉर्चुनिटी नहीं है. अगर आप यहाँ देखें दूसरे पिक्चर में, जो मीडियम हाइट वाले को एक स्टूल और जो छोटे हाइट वाले को 2 स्टूल मिल रहा है. ये कोई प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रीटमेंट नहीं हो रहा है. ये होता है एडजस्टमेंट, ये होता है अकोमोडेशन. और ये अकोमोडेशन बहुत जरूरी है टू क्रिएट दैट लेवल प्लेइंग फील्ड. ये एडजस्टमेंट, इक्वालिटी के लिए ये एडजस्टमेंट जरूरी है. जब सिचुएशंस अनइक्वल हो तो ये वाला जो एडजस्टमेंट है, ये बहुत जरूरी है. दैट क्रिएट्स इक्वालिटी. सो ये एडजस्टमेंट नहीं देना भी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन है. ये सिर्फ फिजिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में नहीं, पॉलिसीज में, एम्प्लॉयमेंट कंडीशंस में, हर तरह में. जो लीव अगर किसी को चाहिए, किसी को पार्ट टाइम वर्क चाहिए, किसी को जॉब रिस्ट्रक्चरिंग चाहिए, तो रीजनेबल अकोमोडेशन इज ऑलवेज इंडिविजुअलाइज्ड. हर एक व्यक्ति के लिए एक जैसा नहीं होता. It's not that one size fits all. So you will have to make adjustment based on individual need, and that is accommodation. And ये वाला जो तीसरा हवाला है, जहां पे it is like जो बैरियर था वो निकल के वो नेट बन गया, which is basically even planning time में. For example, you know, पूरा जो बैरियर था वो निकल के जब नेट बन गया, तो अकोमोडेशन की जरूरत है ही नहीं. दैट इज कॉल्ड द यूनिवर्सल डिजाइन. ये यूनिवर्सल डिजाइन सिर्फ बिल्डिंग्स में नहीं, टेक्नोलॉजी में नहीं, पॉलिसीज में भी. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, यू नो, टीचिंग मेथडोलॉजी, examination system, universal design can be applied across. So that is the thing that we need to really push for, and this law provides for that. I'll come back to the, so ये समझना बहुत जरूरी है discrimination, because why I went at length is that if people with disabilities today, Parkinson's disease, are being discriminated in any which way, either direct, indirect, or denial of reasonable accommodation, please know that इस कानून का इस्तेमाल करके आप जस्टिस ले सकते हैं. तीसरा है फुल एंड इफेक्टिव पार्टिसिपेशन. सिर्फ पार्टिसिपेशन ही नहीं, फुल एंड इफेक्टिव पार्टिसिपेशन, ये भी बहुत जरूरी है, क्योंकि पहले टोकनिज्म होता था कि चलो ठीक है, पर्सन विद डिसेबिलिटी है, उसको इंक्लूड कर लें, लेकिन उसके पार्टिसिपेशन पे फोकस नहीं था. जैसे डेफ पर्सन है, उसको मीटिंग में बुला लेते थे लेकिन इंटरप्रेटर नहीं होता था, या एडमिशन दे देते थे स्कूल में लेकिन इंटरप्रेटर नहीं था. तो ये फुल एंड इफेक्टिव कैसे हुआ? सो दैट इज व्हाट यू नीड टू लुक एट, फुल एंड इफेक्टिव पार्टिसिपेट. रेस्पेक्ट फॉर डिफरेंस, ये भी बहुत जरूरी है that people with disabilities are part of human diversity. Whenever human diversity is discussed, you know, people talk about gender or talk about maybe race, religion, but people with disabilities are also part of human diversity. And जब भी कोई भी चीज बनाते हैं, प्रोडक्ट्स बनाते हैं, एप्स बनाते हैं, टेक्नोलॉजी बनाते हैं, प्रोग्राम्स बनाते हैं, they need to take into account persons with disability as user group or as part of the human diversity and plan accordingly. Many times disability is just an afterthought. पहले हम ऐप बना लें, फिर हम उसको देखेंगे कैसे persons with disabilities can use. That should not be the case. Equality of opportunity, I spoke at length. Accessibility, a very important thing when it comes to built environment, technology, services. Equality between men and women, and of course other gender as well. लेकिन लिखा नहीं था वहाँ कानून में, सिर्फ men and women की बात हुई है. वो भी बहुत जरूरी है because women are doubly disadvantaged. So जो भी programs या कुछ भी करते हैं, we need to take into account women with disabilities as well. And the last is respecting children with disabilities. Children also have right to, express themselves, express their opinion. So you need to take into account the rights of children. So ये जो है 8 principles form the basis of the act. And act में 3 terms हैं: persons with disabilities, persons with benchmark disability, persons with high support need. पहले कानून में एक ही वर्ड था, persons with disability. ये क्या 3 चीजें हैं? पर्सन विद डिसेबिलिटी मतलब कोई भी व्यक्ति जिसको कोई भी मेडिकल कंडीशन हो, इम्पेयरमेंट हो, फिजिकल हो सकता है, मेंटल हो सकता है, इंटेलेक्चुअल हो सकता है, सेंसरी हो सकता है, अगर उसको बैरियर्स फेस करा जिसकी वजह से वो पार्टिसिपेट नहीं कर पा रहा है, वो पर्सन विद डिसेबिलिटी है. Then persons with benchmark disability. Persons with disability, benchmark disability वो है जिसको 40% से ज्यादा डिसेबिलिटी हो. उसके लिए 21 categories of disabilities have been defined. ये है 21 categories of disability, जिसमें पार्किंसन डिसीज भी है. जिसको 40% एंड अबव डिसेबिलिटी होगा उसको पर्सन विथ बेंचमार्क डिसेबिलिटी और उसको डिसेबिलिटी सर्टिफिकेट मिलेगा, जिसकी वजह से कुछ बेनिफिट्स उसको मिलेंगे. तीसरा कैटेगरी है आउट ऑफ दीज बेंचमार्क डिसेबिलिटीज, जिसको सिवियर डिसेबिलिटी है, क्योंकि बेंचमार्क डिसेबिलिटी अगर सिवियर डिसेबिलिटी है, उसको ज्यादा सपोर्ट की जरूरत है, देन एक असेसमेंट बोर्ड होगा जो उसको सर्टिफाई करेगा दैट द पर्सन विद हाई सपोर्ट नीड. तो उसके लिए कुछ और ज्यादा उसको बेनिफिट्स मिलेंगे. Okay. Now I'll come to the provisions of the Act. Okay, I'll come to these provisions first. Before I go into the provisions, what are the rights that are available in this Act? First is right to home and family. Many people with disabilities sometimes are sent into institutions, sometimes even abandoned because of their disability. So ये वाला कानून very clearly says that person with disability has every right to stay in or her home and have a family. Many times people with disabilities are not even allowed to have children. So the person has right to home and family. There are specific clauses for women and children with disabilities. Many times, women with disabilities are forced to go for hysterectomy. Sometimes, women with disabilities को reproductive health का awareness नहीं दिया जाता है, thinking ये कहाँ बच्चे पैदा करेंगे या इनको क्या जरूरत है. So women with disabilities have equal rights. So the ministry's concern should ensure all their programs are for people with disabilities. Equality and non-discrimination, I've spoken at length. Legal capacity. Many times people with disabilities are not allowed to operate bank account, or sometimes they are The guardians are appointed for them to make any financial decisions or any decisions for medical treatment. Yahan pe very clearly it says legal capacity, then the person with disability will make his or her all decisions. Living in the community, many times people with disabilities are again forced to not live in the community, or somewhere, the housing societies complain, and move them out of the society and all that. So you have right to live in the community, which means that, again, when I mentioned right to live in the community, is not just right to live, but also make the community services accessible for persons with disability. Right to liberty, right to move. Some people are tied up because of their disability, etc. This provides right to liberty. And then adequate standard of living. Adequate standard of living has to do with social security. So this act provides for social security for persons with disabilities, which means that pension, caregivers allowance, all that is unemployment allowance, all that has been mentioned in the act. And एक और जो अच्छी बात है यहाँ पे इस act में is that it has to be 25% more. ये कानून कहता है कि बाकी जो लोगों को मिल रहा है, vulnerable sections को पेंशन या कुछ भी मिल रहा है, लोन मिलता है और पॉवर्टी स्कीम्स कई चीजें होती हैं फॉर BPL families, for persons with disabilities, वही स्कीम उनको 25% ज्यादा देना चाहिए. ये 25% इसलिए ज्यादा देना चाहिए क्योंकि people with disabilities का expenditure ज्यादा होता है compared to non-disabled people. So every social security scheme 25% ज्यादा मिलना चाहिए for persons with disability. Then there is protection and safety. This has to do with if there's domestic violence or if there's any kind of harassment, abuse, there are systems to support. You can go and complain about it, and then police has to take action to rescue the person, provide necessary support, even protection during disasters, sports, culture and recreation. पूरा सेक्शन है जहाँ पे बताया जाता है कि हाउ शुड स्पोर्ट्स बी मेड एक्सेसिबल फॉर पीपल टू पार्टिसिपेट करने के लिए, या एज अ ऑडियंस, या स्पोर्ट्स एज अ करियर चुनने के लिए what changes one needs to make. Culture, art and culture, recreation, how do you make recreation inclusive, health, rehabilitation, access to health, barrier free hospitals, ये सब एक्ट में दिया गया है. Education, right to education है, then non-discrimination in employment. Broadly ये सारे जो है ये rights and entitlements हैं. Of course, each one will be a session in itself. I don't have the kind of time to go to, but I will be happy to answer any questions. And ये एक और जो बहुत बड़ा था वो accessibility का, I'll come to that. Accessibility, और ये लिखा है कि गवर्नमेंट को सारे मोड्स ऑफ ट्रांसपोर्टेशन को एक्सेसिबल बनाना चाहिए, एक्सेसिबल रोड्स होने चाहिए, मोबिलिटी एड्स मिलने चाहिए एट अफोर्डेबल कॉस्ट, मीडिया शुड बिकम एक्सेसिबल, पब्लिक बिल्डिंग शुड बी मेड एक्सेसिबल विद इन 5 years टाइम, 5 साल के अंदर, बाय 2022. ऑल सर्विसेज शुड बी मेड एक्सेसिबल इन 2 years टाइम. ये सारा एक्सेसिबिलिटी के ऊपर है RPWD एक्ट का प्रोविजंस. Just to show you the accessibility, sometimes people think that people with disability, there's a range when it comes to even locomotor disability. देखिए range है. Vision disability, the kind of barriers they face. Vision disability, कोई बड़ा font देखता है, कोई cane के साथ चलता है, कोई dogs के साथ चलते हैं, उनको भी कितना प्रॉब्लम्स होता है टू एक्सेस प्लेसेस. These are quickly to give you. Benchmark disability. So Parkinson is now a benchmark disability. So what are the provisions available for people with benchmark disabilities? So there is a 5% reservation in government and government aided educational institutions. 5% का reservation है. अगर कोई पढ़ाई करना चाहता है, हायर एजुकेशन करना चाहता है, IITs, IIMs वगैरह में भी जो गवर्नमेंट और गवर्नमेंट एडेड हैं 5% है. आई वर्क विद IIMs. हर साल 12-13 लोग हर IIM में एडमिशन लेते हैं. तो if anyone is interested, there are young onset people who are looking for, because age का कोई नहीं है. अगर आप हायर एजुकेशन करना चाहते हैं, there is a 5% reservation, so you can get the best of the degrees. Books and learning materials are free of cost. Scholarships are available. Right to free education. This is largely for education in schools. There is a 4% reservation, but this is not, Parkinson is unfortunately not mentioned in the reservation in the employment. 1% is for people with locomotor disabilities. 1% is for people with visual disabilities, 1% for hearing disabilities, 1% for people with intellectual disabilities, mental illness, and multiple disabilities. Unfortunately, 4% is not for Parkinson disease, but if you have multiple disability because of Parkinson disease, then probably you can get, you can apply for a government job basis multiple disabilities. Multiple disabilities is basically वो जो मैंने 21 categories दिखाए थे उसमें से more than one आपको होना चाहिए. You could have Parkinson disease as well as locomotor disability that will actually come under multiple disability. Then social security, pension. So there is a disability pension. Some states have, different states have different pension amount. So you are eligible for that. The Act talks about unemployment allowance. There's a 5% reservation in allotment of agriculture and housing. अगर कोई housing scheme चल रहा है तो उसमें 5% का reservation है. And all poverty alleviation schemes जैसे इंदिरा आवास योजना और इतने सारे योजना है वहां पे 5% reservation है for people with disabilities. Act also talks about caregivers allowance for people with high support need, जिसको ज्यादा support की जरूरत है. Employment. I will talk a little more on employment because that's a very crucial aspect. Earlier, employment was only government employment में है 4% reservation. This act also requires private establishments. There is no quota in the private establishment, but what it says that every establishment should have an equal opportunity policy. और उसको सबमिट करना है कमिश्नर के पास. दूसरा है पॉलिसी को आपको वेबसाइट में डालना है. हर एस्टैब्लिशमेंट को इक्वल अपॉर्चुनिटी पॉलिसी शुड बी ऑन द वेबसाइट. It should collect the information. It should have a database of employees with disabilities. Employers should provide reasonable accommodation. I spoke about the reasonable accommodation. Their information, products and services should be accessible. हर एक establishment को जो 20 people से ज़्यादा लोग हैं, they have to have appoint a liaison officer. And सारे जितने भी HR policies वगैरह हैं उसको RPWD Act के line में बनाना पड़ेगा. उसको review करके you have to make it in line with. And last but not the least, there are grievance redressal process. If, say, for example, if a person in employment facing certain discrimination or harassment or bullying by colleagues, by manager, there should be a central grievance redressal mechanism where the person can safely go and complain. So all these have to be put in place by the corporates. How much time I have?
Sorry, you can continue, no problem.
Okay. So what now I will talk about, see, this is broadly, of course, it also talks about awareness programs. It makes government to take up awareness programs on disability. It requires awareness to be conducted among employers, administrators, everyone. So the act is quite comprehensive in terms of making the government, responsible for undertaking several things to make the place more inclusive. Also, there is implementation and monitoring of the act. So that is why this act becomes very comprehensive, because it has certain mechanisms. There are central and state advisory boards. So the act requires that there should be a central advisory board, and every state should have a disability advisory board who will plan, and usme there are 10 people from the disability sector who will participate in those advisory boards. And that too representing different disabilities, gender representation. And these advisory boards have to meet periodically to discuss, how to implement the act. There is a central chief commissioner, and every state has state commissioner for disabilities. The chief commissioner and state commissioners, they have power of the civil court. अभी मैं आपको बता रही थी ये राइट है, वो राइट है, वो राइट है. If you are not, if you feel that you're being discriminated or you've seen some discrimination, you can write a complaint. Just in a letter, you can write a complaint to the state commissioner and the chief commissioner, and it is their duty. For example, if you've been asked to leave from a job, or you're not being given any accommodation that you need, you can easily write to the state commissioner or to the chief commissioner saying you have been discriminated under this act. And it is the duty of the commissioner to send a letter to the employer saying why you did that, or for that matter, anywhere where you felt discriminated, and they can give a recommendation to the place that they should provide the needed support. There are also district level committees in every district to be appointed. District level pe there should be special courts need to be designated at district level. So हर district में एक special court होगा जो disability के लिए देखेगा, or there should be a public prosecutor should be appointed for disability related courts. And then national fund has been set up to implement this act. Every state should put in their money, fund to implement the act. And it also requires social audits of all the schemes to be done to check if people with disabilities are getting any, a benefit or not. So these are some of the things that you have for, people with disabilities. I will take a pause here. One last slide before I take the pause. Punishment. So this act also has teeth because it has mentioned punishment for violation of the act. Therefore, you can go and complain, and already a lot of people have started. For example, one person on a wheelchair was, this Uber driver cancelled on him because he refused to keep the wheelchair in the dicky. And the person complained, and the transport service provider has been asked, and he had lost his money because he missed the flight, and the person has been asked to compensate much more than, of course, what he lost because of the kind of loss that he had. So people have already started using this act to complain, and they're also getting positive, judgments. With that, I will take a pause. कोई भी सवाल हो या clarification हो, क्योंकि ये act है. This is how the act looks like. इसमें ये available है internet में. So काफी ज़्यादा clauses हैं, लेकिन आप पढ़ सकते हैं बड़े अच्छे से. 102 clauses हैं इसमें. So you can go through in detail, and anytime if you have any clarification, आप कोई भी doubt हो, तो मैं अपना कॉन्टैक्ट डिटेल्स अभी चैट बॉक्स में डालूंगी. You can reach out to know more about the act. I can take up questions now.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much, Rama. It was actually very, very educative session. I know it's such a comprehensive and a very detailed act, and it's very, very long. But thank you for highlighting some of the important points, especially for us. We do have a few questions. I'm just going to start off. The first question was, you spoke about concessions matlab, for persons with disabilities, और are they the same for those with benchmark disabilities? मतलब सिर्फ वो benchmark disabilities जो आपने बताया कि वो 40% disability दिखाना चाहिए तो ही वो concessions मिलेगा, लेकिन what about for persons with disabilities, उनको क्या concessions मिलेंगे?
नहीं, this is a big issue. जो concessions हैं, जो reservation है, ये सिर्फ उनको मिलेगा जिसको 40% and above, जिसके पास वो सर्टिफिकेट हो, बेंचमार्क डिसेबिलिटीज को ही मिलेगा. लेकिन जो कई चीजें हैं जैसे नॉन डिस्क्रिमिनेशन है, लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल इफ आई हैव अ पार्किंसन एंड माय एम्प्लॉयर टेल्स मी दैट इवन दो इट इज नॉट 40%, यू नो, इट्स अ डिफरेंट मैटर दैट वो एक अलग है. नेक्स्ट सेशन you will have a discussion more on disability certificate. जो multiple sclerosis वाले कह रहे हैं कि हमारे पास diagnosis होते ही, MS का diagnosis मिलते ही हमको 40% दे देना चाहिए. Why are they wanting it to become visible disability to give us a 40%? I think even for Parkinson वही है कि भाई जैसे ही आपको, क्योंकि it's a permanent thing, right? So why do you have to wait for it to become, the minute you have a diagnosis of Parkinson, आपको 40% मान लेना चाहिए. But anyway, that's a different story, that why is it not a benchmark disability? अगर आप by chance आप Parkinson है और आपको 40% नहीं है आज की डेट में, लेकिन I would say you should fight for it also, you know, saying that Parkinson itself should be enough to consider them as a benchmark disability. Don't wait for it to make it severe to become benchmark disability. But having said that, just persons with disability who are not benchmark disability, समझिए 30% है 20% है, उनके लिए नॉन डिस्क्रिमिनेशन का क्लॉज है. कल को प्राइवेट सेक्टर में if they are been asked to leave because of their impairment, they still can go to the court on basis of this act, even if they do not have the disability certificate. So that is available for persons with disability, and provision for reasonable accommodation is also there for all persons with disability, whatever be the percentage.
Okay, thank you very much. There's also another question ki, if you're a government pensioner, are there any specific benefits matlab under this act for government pensioners?
So there isn't any specific provision under this act, but it's an interesting question because you know, also about how do you interpret this act. There's also a lot to do with interpretation. क्योंकि pensions जो हैं वो social security के under covered है ये. तो अभी मैंने बोला था कि social security में ये लिखा है कि 25% ज्यादा मिलना चाहिए. So you can, अभी तो कुछ है नहीं, लेकिन बहुत अच्छा सवाल है. You can write to the government citing this clause on social security and saying that, you know, this act provides for 25% more. So therefore you are eligible for, I will read out that clause. The quantum of assistance to persons with disabilities under such schemes, social security schemes and programs shall be at least 25% higher than similar schemes applicable to others. Why not? You know, see, this act में बहुत चीजें ऐसे हैं जो implement नहीं हो रहे हैं. Act तो बन गया है, लेकिन बहुत अच्छे से implement नहीं हो रहा है. One of the ways to implement is to, you know, take it up and start writing. आप ये क्लॉज को लेके लिख सकते हैं कि भाई 25% ज्यादा होना चाहिए as per this. अगर आपको जवाब नहीं मिल रहा है तो आप इस इंफॉर्मेशन को लेके कमिश्नर के पास जा सकते हैं और बोल सकते हैं कि ये एक्ट को वो इंटरप्रेट करके देंगे. So we should all test it out in the court. But you may, I would say, from my understanding of this act, you are eligible for 25% more.
Okay, great. So an email to the commissioner would be a good way
Good.
to start. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, अभी बहुत सारे questions है कि allowances for train, air, bus travel. So is there anything under this act for people with disabilities?
See now, yes. So now, जहां ये word person with disability लिखा है, if there is a concession for persons with disability, किसी ने शायद income tax का भी पूछा है कि income tax. So if the income tax says the word persons with disabilities, then automatically it means that includes Parkinson. You don't have to necessarily say Parkinson's अलग से. Persons with disabilities का definition में ही आ गया है Parkinson disease. So जो concessions available हैं for persons with disabilities, it is available for Parkinson's as well.
Okay, and is this also without the disability certificate, or is the disability certificate
unfortunately,
only? Okay.
Unfortunately, any of the concessions जो भी है वो disability certificate होगा तभी होगा. All the concessions. Only the non-discrimination part of it is for persons with disabilities. I mean, all persons with disabilities, but all the concessions reservation is for persons with benchmark disabilities.
Okay, there's someone actually who has just written in that the railway does not give concession to a Parkinson's person when he gets even 80% disability with the disability certificate. So in that case, what would someone have to do?
See, one has to write. I know, but railways is not, they give, they're quite archaic in their concession. Even persons with locomotor disability, if it's only 70%, only for blind, they have their own definition. They are not really going by the disability sector definition, but it's important that, again, advocacy. The reason why we talking about it is that definitely it's very valid कि Parkinson disease is now a recognized disability under the act, and railways should provide concession for, and it's been a long time railways को सब लोग बोल रहे हैं कि भाई आप ऐसे अलग अलग क्यों कर रहे हैं, why don't you make it as persons with disabilities, then everything is getting covered. But the act doesn't say specifically. Again, advocacy is required with the railways for looking at persons with disability as one category and providing the same concessions. Maybe उसमें ये कर सकते हैं persons with disabilities, benchmark disabilities को ये मिलेगा और persons with high support needs के लिए इतना concession मिलेगा. They can do that kind of a differentiation.
Okay.
But
great.
Please do write to railways and regarding this.
Okay, thank you. There's another question: if they are diagnosed with Parkinson's, should they tell their employer, and are they allowed to officially continue to work?
Yes. So it is your decision whether you want to tell the employer or not. आपकी मर्जी है. ये फोर्स भी नहीं कर सकते कि आपने क्यों नहीं बताया अपने हेल्थ कंडीशन. कई बारी एप्लीकेशन फॉर्म में लोग पूछ लेते हैं कि आपकी कोई हेल्थ कंडीशन है कि नहीं, लेकिन वो पूछना गलत है. वो पूछना गलत है. यू कैन नॉट बी आस्किंग दिस क्वेश्चन बिफोर द एम्प्लॉयमेंट. आफ्टर यू आर एम्प्लॉयड, there is a self-identification form which the company should ask you to fill, again voluntary. They can't force you कि आपने क्यों नहीं fill किया. Yes, I would encourage you to mention that you have Parkinson disease, and उसकी वजह से आपने बोल दिया और उसकी वजह से आपको कोई discrimination होता है, then you are covered under the act. अगर आप नहीं बोलेंगे तो कैसे आपको कोई accommodation मिलेगा? अगर आपने बोला ही नहीं और कल को आप कहते हैं कि भाई मुझे ये सब सुविधाएं नहीं मिली, वो unless you, so you will have to make that first move to say that I have a disability, ask for those accommodations that you need, and then if they deny it, then that is discrimination. So I would say please go ahead and disclose your disability, but ensure that, if the company has good policies for people with disabilities, then that's great. If they do not have, and if you face certain consequence because of that, then you will have to go to the court. Abhi, मैं बोलूं, the number of companies that have equal opportunity, there are quite a few companies that have, the bade companies hain, they're making their EO policies, but 90% of the companies are not making their EO policies. But it is a good time to create that awareness amongst the employers. Then you can tell them about this act, vagara, beforehand.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, another very commonly asked question ki income tax के कौन से benefits होते हैं अगर if you are a person with disability?
See, IT के हैं benefits. If you have 40%, I think there's a 75,000 का exemption hai. If you are 80%, I think it's 1,25,000 income tax rebate hai for persons with disabilities if you have a certificate.
Okay, thank you. Also, if you're a person with disability, is there any financial assistance provided by the government in case you are unemployed or, in case you need for a surgery? Is there any?
See, income limit बहुत जरूरी है. Household income limit is what they ask for. Yes, there are a pension available for people with disability. Every state has pensions for people with disabilities. That is definitely available for people with disabilities, but it's a very meager amount. 1,000, 1,500 kind of. Only few states have a little more, but largely, it's a very small amount. But that is the concession, that is a pension that's available for people with, disabilities today.
Sorry, and if I could ask you a little more, who should they be contacting?
So there is at a central level, there is a Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. Okay. And then there are district level welfare officers. You should contact the district welfare office to get that information. A Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment or the state commissioner or state Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. These are the places that you can go to getting the pension information.
Okay. And also for, as I mentioned that, there's surgeries also for people with Parkinson's, which are in lakhs. Does anything get covered under the Persons with Disability Act where they can get either an exemption or a subsidy?
See, unfortunately, there aren't any, but yes, people with disabilities, ek jagah pe hai ki, you will get assistive technology, surgeries and all, but it is all for BPL categories. Unfortunately, there is a BPL category ka wo ek hai, then you are given all the facilities. But not many people will fall under the typical definition because BPL is for a household. Though I may be unemployed, but if I'm in the household, my income may be more. Then those concessions are not provided for, people with disabilities. So as of now, what is provided is only for BPL. Otherwise, it is not provided, for surgeries, etc.
Okay, for BPL ka matlab below poverty line.
Below poverty line, sorry, below poverty line.
yeah, no problem. Okay, और एक question जो मतलब बहुत लोगों पूछते हैं कि इंश्योरेंस के बारे में और मेडिक्लेम के बारे में अभी पार्किंसंस तो इंक्लूड किया गया है राइट्स टू पर्सन्स विद डिसेबिलिटी एक्ट, लेकिन फिर भी इंश्योरेंस कंपनीज और दीस मेडिक्लेम कंपनीज डोंट गिव बेनिफिट्स, तो हम क्या कर सकते हैं उसके लिए?
सो अभी रिसेंटली एक IRDA हैज कम अप विद एक्सक्लूजन्स. उसमें अगर इंक्लूजन है पार्किंसन डिजीज का, I don't think that Parkinson disease is coming under exclusion. Therefore, IRDA says that Parkinson diseases have to be provided. You have to look into the IRDA notification to check if Parkinson's disease is included. My hunch is that it is not an excluded thing. Therefore, Parkinson disease is covered under the insurance, and you should get insurance coverage.
Okay.
But yes, again, a lot of insurance companies may not be aware. So it's important to pull out the IRDA notification and give them that notification so that the coverage happens. I will search for the IRDA. It's available on the Google IRDA notification for exclusion. That you can, look into that and send it to the, uh, insurance provider.
Okay, thank you. Just a few more questions. One person has asked that, if you're a person with you said right now that there's a 5%, I think, reservation in government and public sector jobs.
4% reservation.
4%, sorry. But Parkinson's is not included. So he wants to know, how do we convince someone to give us a locomotor because they do have difficulties with movement and
Parkinson is
mobility.
unfortunately in the list of exclusions. In the thing. Repeat your question.
So someone was asking that you said that 4% reservation is there in public and government sector jobs. However, it's only for particular categories, and one of them being locomotor. And people with Parkinson's do have difficulty with mobility and movement. So who does one go to? So you probably get a disability certificate for being a person with Parkinson's, but who do you convince that they should give you a certificate for having a locomotor disability as well? Is that a separate process that they have to do, or so that's basically
so they will come under either locomotor disability, or they can even come under multiple disabilities, I would say, because even multiple disabilities you have reservation. For locomotor also you have reservation. So depending on what the certificate really says, ideally it should be multiple disabilities if you have. Then every government employment, एक तो तरीका होता है कि आप जैसे हर एक गवर्नमेंट जो है अपना अनाउंसमेंट करती है, जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल बैंक्स एंड ऑल दे मेक एग्जाम्स होता है, सिविल सर्विसेज के एग्जाम्स होते हैं, हर एक में 4% का रिजर्वेशन होना चाहिए, अगर नहीं है तो इट्स अ वायलेशन ऑफ द एक्ट. सो PSUs अनाउंस करते हैं wherever you get the government jobs, वहीं से आपको कोई एक centralized, there is definitely a, what do you call, there is a employment exchange, वहां पे भी आके आप जाके आप कर सकते हैं. लेकिन many of the departments, many of the organizations, they have these exams, they have their methods to recruit. तो वहां जाके अपने आप को register करना है, या you have to keep an eye on the newspapers to see what kind of vacancies are arising, and that is how you will get. And definitely जहां SC/ST reservation होता है वहां पे disability का भी reservation होता है, and you will have to apply accordingly.
Okay, thank you very much. I think just the last question, and I think that comes from me as well, and it's going to be like, how does an organization work towards implementation? We have a lot of people from all over India, and especially in the smaller towns and areas, they say that people don't even know about the disability certificate, and none of the government officials are aware that there is something like this. So how does one start the process of getting these laws implemented? Is it just?
That's a very good question. For an organization, apart from providing services, बहुत जरूरी है services provide करना, मैं वो बता रही थी, लेकिन सिर्फ services provide करना is important, very important. But at the same time, you have to create an advocacy agenda for yourself. Advocacy जो है ना, ये अब यहाँ तक पहुंचे हैं, तो थोड़ा बहुत जो आप देख रहे हैं, it's thanks to people with disabilities fighting for rights. So somewhere it has taken so long to even get an act like this. But that's not the end of the story. Advocacy, जैसे जो to great extent, many of you may have heard of this name, Javed Abidi. Late Mr. Javed Abidi, he had a death. I mean, he died quite suddenly 2 years ago. He is the one who initiated a cross disability movement. Varna sirf blind were fighting for blind, deaf were fighting for. a very comprehensive cross disability movement. And I know इसमें ये सब करने के लिए even fast and to death, चिट्ठियां तो हर रोज वो लिखते थे, हर रोज प्रेस रिलीजेस हर रोज जाता था. अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट कोर्ट केसेस हुए, कई हुए कोर्ट केसेस, तब जाके कुछ चीजें आज आप देख रहे हैं वो है थैंक्स टू द फाइट दैट ही डिड. सो एडवोकेसी का मतलब ये नहीं कि सिर्फ फाइट फाइट फाइट, इवन राइटिंग, परस्यूइंग, फॉलोइंग अप, इट इज अ लॉट ऑफ हार्ड वर्क, प्रोड्यूसिंग रिसर्च रिपोर्ट्स, ये इश्यूज हैं, people with Parkinson's have these issues, putting out a white paper out there. So ये सब होता है advocacy, and every organization should take up an agenda. It is not easy. आज आप लड़ाई करेंगे, इसका बेनिफिट शायद अगले जनरेशन को मिलेगा, लेकिन हो सकता है कुछ चीजें मिल भी जाए, मिलेंगे भी इस जनरेशन में, लेकिन start the work now. And yeah, that's what I would say, that go through the act. आप अपने में डिस्कस करिए कि 1 2 3 चीजें आप उठाएंगे गवर्नमेंट के साथ, ये क्या चीजें उठाएंगे, स्ट्रैटेजी बनाइए कि कैसे उठाएंगे आप. नॉट जस्ट से दैट ये करना है, यू मे इवन गिव सजेशंस कि ऐसा ऐसा कर सकते हैं. गो एंड मीट, I told about Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. I said there is a state commissioner for disability. I said there is a central advisory board, एक state advisory board. पहला काम है आप पता लगाइए कि अपने स्टेट में कौन है, कौन कौन ये रोल प्ले कर रहा है, सेंट्रल कमिटी में कौन बैठा हुआ है, स्टेट कमिटी में कौन बैठा हुआ है, क्या पार्किंसन की बात वो कर रहे हैं वहां पे. तो यू शुड स्टार्ट टॉकिंग टू दीज पीपल. सो आप एक वेबिनार में सोशल जस्टिस चीफ कमिश्नर को बुलाइए. So, they will be happy to come. Sometimes we think that they won't come, but just try. At least अपने deputy commissioner को भेज देंगे, but good starting point. So some of these are some things that you can do.
Okay, thank you very, very much. And I can see the passion with which you talk also. It's kind of, I think, got all of us motivated as well to make a change. But thank you very, very much for your insights today. I think it was a great introduction to, rights for persons with disabilities. It's something that, we hadn't covered in detail before because it's such an extensive document. हम वो डॉक्यूमेंट हम सबके साथ शेयर करेंगे ये वेबिनार के बाद. Okay, so that you all can read. It's also available on Google, so you can also look for it there. Okay. मुझे पता है कि बहुत लोग ने डिसेबिलिटी सर्टिफिकेट और प्रोसेस के बारे में पूछा है. We will definitely talk about it in detail next webinar on the 10th of December. So please do register for that. But once again, thank you very, very much, Rama. It was a very interesting session. We've had over 290 people register for the event today from all over India. So they're very, very interested in this topic, and hopefully this can be the starting point for advocacy and changes and bringing about changes for people with Parkinson's. So thank you very much for being with us here
today. I am putting in my contact details
in the chat box. Sure.
Yes. Oh, it's gone to everybody?
No, I think it just went to me. I think you have to.
Oh, I should put everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, done.
Yeah. Okay, great. So thank you so much. तो रामा ने उनका ईमेल एड्रेस और उनका कॉन्टैक्ट नंबर भी लिखा है चैट बॉक्स में. हम यूट्यूब पे भी शेयर करेंगे ताकि आप देख सकते हैं. So once again, thank you very, very much for giving us so much of information today. We hope to have you back also.
Anytime. Happy to be supportive. And please feel free to reach out if you want to discuss any specific advocacy strategy. I would be happy to support. Thank you.
Okay. Also, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. अगर आप पहले बार हमारे वेबिनार में आए हैं तो यू कैन प्लीज कॉन्टैक्ट अस एंड यू कैन नो मोर अबाउट हमारे सर्विसेज के बारे में. दे आर ऑल फ्री ऑफ कॉस्ट. सो प्लीज डू कॉन्टैक्ट अस. मैं स्क्रीन शेयर करती हूँ और आप हमारे जो डिटेल्स है वो आप देख सकते हैं. These are details. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. तो आप हमारे मोबाइल फ़ोन पे कांटेक्ट कर सकते हैं या ईमेल भी भेज सकते हैं या कोई भी हमारे सोशल मीडिया के पेजेस पे भी आप मतलब मैसेज कर सकते हैं. Okay, thank you everyone for joining. Hope to see you on the 10th of December for the next webinar. वो registration form, we will be sending it out soon. So thank you very much and do have a lovely weekend. And thank you, Rama, once again.